You know that feeling, pure, unadulterated satisfaction when someone who thinks they're untouchable finally gets exactly what they deserve, maybe even double? Hold on to that feeling because that's where this story ends. But it started with my lawn, or what was left of it. It looked diseased. Not just brown and dry like neglected summer grass, but aggressively, unnaturally dead. Huge, ugly splotches spread out like chemical burns, sickly yellow fringed with white, scarring the green I'd actually started to take pride in. The patterns weren't random. They curved with cruel precision near the edges, almost tracing the steps of someone deliberately spraying death onto my property. My stomach clenched, tight and cold. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't blight. This felt personal. This felt like an attack. And standing there, surveying the ruin, a cold, hard anger began to solidify beneath the initial shock. I didn't know precisely how yet, but I knew someone had done this. And glancing next door at the unervingly perfect chemically green expanse belonging to Mr. Henderson, I had a sickeningly strong feeling I knew exactly who. His immaculate lawn suddenly looked less like perfection and more like a silent, smug declaration of war, a war he was going to bitterly regret starting. Life before the great lawn poisoning felt, well, comfortably average. Predictably suburban. I'm Mark, a dad hitting my late 30s, juggling a standard office job with the beautiful chaos of having a young son. We'd poured our savings into this house a couple of years back, our first real stake in the ground. It wasn't a mansion, didn't have sprawling acres, but it was ours. And the yard, modest as it was, became my little weekend project. Look, I'm no gardening guru. My lawn care regime mostly involved mowing before it got embarrassing and occasionally remembering the sprinkler. But I genuinely enjoyed being out there, kicking a ball with my boy, feeling the cool grass underfoot on a summer evening. It symbolized stability, a tangible piece of the quiet life we were building. Our neighborhood is pleasant enough, tree-lined streets, the distant soundtrack of kids playing. But like many such places, it operates under the watchful eye of a homeowners association. The infamous HOA. Ours wasn't usually tyrannical, more focused on maintaining a certain aesthetic standard. Keep the grass reasonably short, stick to approved fence stains, no derelict cars playing lawn ornament, the usual covenants. Mostly it just encouraged tidiness, which was fine by me. I wanted our home to look welcoming, to contribute positively. Then there was Mr. Henderson, my immediate neighbor. Retired, probably late 60s, and seemingly channeling all his post-career energy into achieving lawn perfection that bordered on the fanatical. His yard was intense. Like PGA Tour level intense. Greener than nature probably intended. He was always out there, fussing, trimming, inspecting, likely convinced dandelions were a personal affront. I remember shortly after we moved in he'd commented, loud enough for me to hear across the driveway, about how the previous owners clearly didn't understand proper soil aeration. It wasn't advice, it was judgment wrapped in gardening jargon. We mostly exchanged stiff nods during mailbox encounters. He always wore this slightly pinched expression, especially when his gaze drifted towards my perfectly adequate, but admittedly less obsessive lawn. I initially wrote him off as just a grumpy old perfectionist, someone best left to his meticulous routines. Live and let live, keep my side tidy, offer a polite wave. Simple. Harmless. Oh, how wrong I was. The first real hint that Henderson's obsession might spill across the property line wasn't dramatic, just odd. I discovered a small circular patch of distinctly yellowed grass right near the boundary between our yards. Maybe the size of a dinner plate. My first thought? A neighborhood dog walker cutting corners. Annoying but plausible. I gave it some extra water and mentally shrugged it off. A week or so later, another patch appeared nearby, slightly bigger this time, again hugging the invisible line separating his kingdom from mine. Okay, probably not Fido. Maybe some kind of lawn disease? I spent an hour down the Google rabbit hole searching lawn fungus types and sudden brown patch causes. Nothing quite matched. This grass didn't just look dry, it looked scorched, almost bleached at the edges, like it had been chemically assaulted. Then the passive aggression started. Henderson was meticulously trimming his already immaculate hedges one Saturday morning while I was pushing my mower. Bit of a losing battle with those weeds over there, isn't it, Mark? He called over, his focus apparently still on his shrubbery, but his voice carried clear as day. There was a distinct lack of friendly advice in his tone, it was pure condescension. Doing my best, Mr. Henderson. I replied, forcing politeness. A few days after that, I found a neatly folded piece of paper slipped under my doormat. No signature, just typed words. A well-kept lawn is the hallmark of a responsible homeowner. Please address the dandelion situation promptly. Dandelions? Seriously? I scanned my yard and found maybe 3 tops. I pulled them out immediately, feeling a surge of irritation. It was petty, cowardly, but still, I reasoned, just grumpy neighbor territory. But the dead patches kept appearing, small circles of death, always clustered near his side of the lawn. It felt less and less random. One afternoon, pulling into my driveway after work, I saw him. He was standing right at the property line, just staring intently at my lawn. He didn't seem to notice me at first. When my car door shut, he startled, turned abruptly without a wave or nod, and retreated quickly back into his house, the curtains twitching shut behind him. That evening, under the porch light, I saw it, another small, sickly yellow spot, right near where he'd been standing just hours before. Coincidence? My mind started churning. Could he be doing this? Deliberately? It seemed almost cartoonishly villainous. Who poisons grass over a perceived lack of tidiness? But the image of him staring, the relentless precision of the dead spots always near his domain, the knot of unease in my stomach tightened. Why the intense focus? Why always near the border? The questions echoed in the quiet suburban air, unanswered and deeply unsettling. My own front yard was starting to feel hostile. The situation simmered, then began to properly escalate, like turning up the heat under a pot slowly. Those small, circular dead spots continued to materialize near the property line, appearing every week or two. Never large enough on their own to cause a massive outcry, but collectively creating a diseased-looking border along his side. They were like persistent little jabs, constant reminders of his disapproval. I became hyper-aware of Henderson's presence. His routine didn't change outwardly, the endless lawn care rituals, the brief, stiff nods, the occasional disapproving frown cast across the yard. But now I'd catch him more often, lingering glances when he thought I wasn't looking. There was a focused intensity there, a scrutiny that felt chillingly personal. It wasn't just observation, it felt like surveillance. One Saturday I decided to try fighting back, botanically speaking. I bought some decent quality fertilizer, hoping that strengthening the healthy grass might help it resist whatever was causing these patches, or at least recover faster. As I was methodically pushing the spreader across the lawn, Henderson emerged onto his porch, arms crossed, a silent sentinel. He just stood there watching me. Not casually, but with this unnerving, judgmental stillness. After several long minutes of this silent observation, he finally spoke, his voice carrying easily across the space between our houses. "Using the cheap stuff again, Mark?" he drawled, a smug little smirk playing on his lips. "Well, I suppose you get what you pay for in this life." My knuckles whitened on the spreader handle. I wanted to shout something back, ask him what his damn problem was, but I just gave a non-committal wave and kept walking. Internally, though, I was seething. A couple of weeks after the fertilizer incident, the first official HOA letter arrived. Not about dead grass, yet. It was a violation notice regarding the grass edging along the public sidewalk. Apparently, it was marginally too high in one section. It was petty, something I usually handled every other mow anyway. But the timing, coming so soon after Henderson's comments and the ongoing lawn spots, it felt orchestrated. Had he filed a formal complaint? I couldn't prove it, but the suspicion was strong. It felt like he was weaponizing the HOA, using the rules to harass me indirectly. I meticulously edged the entire sidewalk that same day, making it razor-sharp perfect. I even took time-stamped photos afterward, feeling vaguely ridiculous, like I was documenting evidence in a suburban Cold War no one else even knew was being fought. The feeling of being targeted started to weigh on me. Was I becoming paranoid? Was I letting this grumpy old man get under my skin disproportionately? I voiced my suspicions to my wife. She agreed Henderson was peculiar, maybe even obsessive, but malicious poisoning seemed like a stretch. "He's probably just bored and overly critical, honey," she tried to reassure me. Maybe. But the constant dead spots, the staring, the sneering comments, the conveniently timed HOA notice, my gut screamed otherwise. Feeling a bit foolish but needing some peace of mind, I installed a wide-angle security camera above the garage, pointing towards the front yard. Officially it was for general security. Unofficially, I desperately hoped it might catch something incriminating, or at least act as a deterrent. The air felt thick with unspoken tension. I had a sinking feeling this passive-aggressive battle was about to turn into an all-out assault. And then, the Saturday morning of the planned barbecue, it happened. The escalation wasn't subtle anymore. It was a full-blown declaration of chemical warfare. We had friends coming over later that day, aiming for a relaxed afternoon in the backyard. I'd spent part of Friday evening tidying up, cleaning the grill, even giving the front lawn a fresh mow, carefully navigating around the existing, smaller dead zones near Henderson's property line. When I'd gone to bed, the lawn looked fine. Not perfect but decent enough. Green, mostly healthy. When I glanced out the front window first thing Saturday morning, coffee mug halfway to my lips, my blood turned to ice water. Gone were the scattered, smaller spots. Now huge, aggressive swathes of grass were completely obliterated. Sickly yellow fading to a ghostly white at the edges, spreading in ugly, undeniable arcs across the prime sections of my front yard. It looked like someone had methodically walked across my lawn with an industrial sprayer, leaving a trail of destruction. The pattern was blatant now, horrifyingly clear. It started near the boundary with Henderson's pristine green, then curved inwards, devastating the healthiest parts. My plans for grilling burgers and sharing beers instantly vanished, consumed by a surge of white-hot fury mixed with a deeply unsettling sense of violation. This wasn't passive aggression anymore. This was overt sabotage. This was undeniably intentional. My first coherent thought, the camera. Heart pounding, hands shaking slightly with adrenaline, I grabbed my phone and pulled up the security footage from overnight. I frantically scrolled back through the motion-activated recordings. There. Around 2:15 a.m. A figure emerged from the darkness near the edge of the frame, right along the property line shared with Henderson. The infrared night vision blurred the details, but the build, the slightly stiff way the person moved, it strongly resembled Henderson. The figure carried something, a canister or sprayer of some kind. They moved along the edge, then clearly stepped onto my lawn, making broad, sweeping motions with the object. But frustratingly, a large ornamental bush partially obscured the most critical moments. I could see him or someone looking exactly like him at the scene. I could see suspicious actions. But could I definitively prove in court that he was spraying poison? The crucial, smoking gun moment was infuriatingly hidden by foliage. Later that morning, as I stood numbly at the curb, just staring at the chemical carnage, Henderson emerged from his house. He deliberately ambled over to retrieve his newspaper from the driveway, pausing dramatically to survey the devastation on my side of the line. He didn't even bother feigning surprise or sympathy. Instead, a small, utterly smug smirk curled his lips. "Oh dear, Mark," he said, his voice dripping with false concern that absolutely didn't reach his cold eyes. "Looks like you've really let things go now. Such a shame. It really does impact the aesthetic of the entire street, you know? Especially my property value." That final jab, implying my ruined lawn hurt his bottom line, snapped something inside me. He wasn't just destroying my property, he was gloating about it, confident I couldn't pin it on him directly. He knew. And he was reveling in my powerlessness. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just met his gaze, holding it, letting the silence stretch, thick with my unspoken rage. He eventually gave a dismissive little shrug, that infuriating smirk still firmly in place, and retreated back into his fortress of perfect grass. In that moment, standing amidst the chemical ruins, my anger coalesced into icy resolve. You wanted to play dirty? Fine. Game on. But I wasn't going to sling mud. I was going to build a case. I wasn't just going to get mad, I was going to get methodical. The barbecue was cancelled. My Saturday was now dedicated to research, potent herbicides, chemical soil testing, and most importantly, the fine print of our HOA's bylaws covering property damage, chemical usage violations, and dispute resolution. If the camera couldn't give me undeniable proof, I'd find another way. The system he tried to manipulate against me? I'd turn it back on him tenfold. This wasn't just about grass anymore. This was about justice. My fury had cooled, sharpening into a focused determination. A shouting match across the fence was exactly what Henderson would expect and enjoy. It would achieve nothing but temporary catharsis for me and amusement for him. No, my revenge needed to be colder, more calculated, hitting him where his pride resided, his reputation and his wallet, using the very system he felt entitled to manipulate, the HOA. My deep dive into herbicides had planted a seed of an idea. The rapid, almost instantaneous death of the grass, the specific bleached look, it screamed something stronger than typical weed and feed products. It hinted at commercial-grade chemicals. Then I remembered something seemingly insignificant. Henderson had taken his trash and recycling bins to the curb unusually late the night before the major lawn destruction. At the time, it barely registered. Now it felt like a potential lead. Could he have been disposing of the evidence, the empty container? It felt like a long shot, maybe even bordering on desperate, but I needed something tangible. Rummaging through someone's garbage felt distinctly unpleasant, crossing a line I normally wouldn't. But was it worse than secretly poisoning your neighbor's property out of sheer spite? Not even close. So, under the cloak of pre-dawn darkness the night before the next trash collection, heart thudding against my ribs, I slipped outside. His bin sat innocently at the curb. Trying to be swift and silent, I lifted the lid of his main garbage bin. Just ordinary household trash on top. I carefully shifted a couple of bags aside, and then I saw it. Not the jug itself, he wasn't that foolish. But wedged down the side, partially concealed by a pizza box, was a crumpled-up instruction booklet and, crucially, the distinctive plastic safety seal from a large multi-gallon jug of potent, industrial-strength herbicide. The kind landscaping professionals use, the kind absolutely not meant for casual spot treatment of residential lawns, and known for causing exactly the kind of rapid chemical burn currently scarring my yard. It wasn't video proof, but combined with everything else, it was powerful circumstantial evidence. But I needed irrefutable proof. I immediately ordered an expedited soil testing kit online. As soon as it arrived, I meticulously collected samples, from the epicenters of the dead zones, from adjacent healthy patches of my lawn for control, and, feeling a surge of audacity, a tiny, barely noticeable core sample from the very edge of his pristine lawn, right next to one of the largest dead patches on my side. I documented the sample locations with photos and sent them off to the lab, the fee feeling less like an expense and more like an investment in vindication. While awaiting the results, I started paying even closer attention to the surrounding properties. And that's when I noticed it. Mrs. Gable, the sweet elderly woman whose property bordered Henderson's on the other side, now had two small but distinct dead patches near her property line with him. They had the same telltale bleached, chemically burned appearance. My God. It wasn't just me. He was waging a silent chemical war on anyone whose yard didn't meet his impossible, tyrannical standards. About 10 days later, the email I'd been waiting for arrived, the soil test results. My hands were actually trembling as I opened the attached report. Bingo. Crystal clear. The samples from the dead zones on my lawn showed significantly elevated concentrations of the exact chemical group listed in that crumpled herbicide booklet I'd fished from his trash. The control samples from my healthy grass and the sample from his lawn? Completely normal levels. This was it. This was the linchpin. The pattern of damage across my lawn, the suspicious figure on camera, the discovery of the herbicide instructions, the confirmation of the specific chemical residue in my soil, and now the corroborating evidence of similar damage on another neighbor's property. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a detailed, evidence-backed narrative of calculated, malicious destruction. Henderson wasn't just a grumpy old man. He was a serial lawn poisoner. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. I finally had the undeniable proof I needed. The satisfaction was immense, a wave of certainty washing away the frustration. The twist wasn't a sudden shocking revelation, but the satisfying click of all the pieces falling perfectly into place, revealing the full extent of his petty tyranny. Now it was time to act. Armed with a folder thick with evidence, I bypassed Henderson's front door entirely. No dramatic confrontation, no angry accusations hurled across the lawn. That would grant him the stage he craved and likely descend into unproductive shouting. My revenge would be delivered coolly, officially, through the bureaucratic channels he himself had tried to weaponize. It would be far more effective and infinitely more infuriating for him. I spent an entire evening meticulously compiling my case. Dated, high-resolution photographs documenting the progression of the lawn damage, from the very first small spots to the widespread chemical burns after the barbecue incident. A detailed log documenting Henderson's passive-aggressive comments, the anonymous note, his suspicious staring, and the times I'd observed him near the property line, including the night of the major damage. Clear stills from the security footage, highlighting the figure resembling him near my lawn carrying the sprayer-like object during the critical overnight hours. The official soil test results from the certified lab, clearly indicating the abnormal concentrations of the specific industrial herbicide group in the damaged areas only. Photos I'd discreetly taken of the similar dead patches emerging on Mrs. Gable's lawn adjacent to Henderson's property. And finally, printouts detailing the specific herbicide identified, its intended professional use, its potential dangers, and highlighting our HOA's specific bylaws regarding property damage, neighborly conduct, and the improper use or disposal of restricted chemicals within the community. I drafted a formal cover letter, calm, factual, devoid of emotional language. It detailed the chronological sequence of events, the significant damage inflicted upon my property, and the clear evidence pointing to Mr. Henderson's responsibility. I formally requested the HOA board investigate the matter thoroughly and take appropriate action as per the governing documents, specifically citing the clauses related to property damage and chemical misuse. I also explicitly stated the financial burden I would face for professional lawn remediation. Crucially, I had spoken gently with Mrs. Gable earlier that day. Showing her my compiled evidence, including the soil test results and the photos of her own lawn, turned her quiet confusion into righteous indignation. She readily agreed to submit her own written statement to the HOA, corroborating the damage pattern on her property bordering Henderson's and mentioning his generally critical attitude. I submitted the entire comprehensive package electronically to the HOA management company, requesting confirmation of receipt and asking for the timeline for review. The following week crawled by, each day amplifying the anticipation. Then the email landed in my inbox. Subject: HOA complaint resolution Henderson property. My pulse quickened. The HOA board had reviewed the submitted evidence package, deemed it substantial and credible, and had issued formal violation notices to Mr. Henderson. Furthermore, they had scheduled a mandatory hearing via Zoom to discuss the findings and determine penalties. The day of the Zoom hearing felt surreal, like attending court from my living room. Henderson popped up on screen, his face already flushed a deep, angry red, radiating indignation. Brenda, the HOA board president, a woman known for her no-nonsense efficiency, calmly laid out the complaints filed by myself and Mrs. Gable, and summarized the evidence submitted. Henderson immediately launched into a sputtering, blustering denial. This is utterly preposterous. A complete fabrication. My lawn is immaculate, a testament to proper care. Why on earth would I damage his pathetic patch of weeds? He fumed, gesturing dismissively towards his camera. Then it was my turn. I remained calm, sharing my screen. I walked the board, and Henderson, through the dated photographs, the clear lab report highlighting the chemical concentrations, the map showing the damage patterns on both my lawn and Mrs. Gable's, and the stills from the security footage. I didn't need to point fingers wildly. I simply stated the facts. The independent soil analysis confirms the presence of highly concentrated, non-standard herbicide residues specifically in the damaged zones, consistent with targeted, deliberate application, not accidental drift or runoff, I said coolly. Mrs. Gable then spoke briefly and powerfully, her elderly voice steady as she confirmed the identical damage appearing on her lawn adjacent to Henderson's property line, adding that she'd never used such chemicals herself. Henderson's bluster started to visibly deflate as the evidence mounted. He stammered about possible runoff from street cleaning crews, implausible, maybe blaming the lawn care company he occasionally used for minor tasks. Everyone knew he did the main work himself. But the soil tests were specific, the pattern across two properties undeniable, the timeline incriminating. Brenda finally cut him off, her voice firm. Mr. Henderson, frankly, the evidence presented is compelling and comprehensive. We have certified lab results confirming specific chemical contamination matching industrial herbicides, extensive photographic documentation, corroborating testimony from another affected homeowner, and video evidence placing you in the immediate vicinity during the likely time of application. She paused for effect, then delivered the verdict. Based on the evidence, the board finds you in violation of HOA regulations pertaining to the destruction of neighboring property and, significantly, the improper handling and application of restricted chemical substances within our community. She announced the standard fine for property damage. My heart beat faster. And then came the beautiful, satisfying kicker. Furthermore, Brenda continued, looking directly at Henderson's image on the screen, given the egregious nature of the chemical misuse, the potential environmental hazard, and the deliberate pattern of damage, the board has voted unanimously to impose the maximum allowable secondary fine for hazardous actions, effectively doubling the total financial penalty. You will also be held fully liable for the complete professional remediation costs for both Mr. my last name, S. and Mrs. Gable's lawns, upon submission of certified invoices. Henderson's face drained of all color. He went from crimson rage to a pasty, sickly white in seconds. The smug arrogance completely vanished, replaced by wide-eyed shock and sputtering disbelief. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried to argue about the severity, the unfairness, but Brenda simply stated, "The decision is final, Mr. Henderson. You will receive the official documentation outlining the fines and remediation requirements within 48 hours. Seeing that carefully constructed facade of superiority crumble under the weight of cold, hard facts and financial consequence, that was the ultimate payoff. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, but it was deeply, profoundly satisfying. Justice delivered not with poison but with paperwork. The aftermath brought a quiet sense of vindication that was almost as sweet as the HOA hearing itself. Mr. Henderson received the formal notification detailing his significantly doubled fines and the legally binding requirement to foot the bill for restoring both my lawn and Mrs. Gable's. There was no appeal, no further argument. The evidence was simply too airtight. Watching the professional landscaping crew arrive a couple of weeks later, a crew explicitly paid for by Henderson, felt like a tangible symbol of victory. They meticulously cut out the vast dead sections of sod, prepared the soil and laid down fresh, healthy green turf. It required diligent watering and patience, but slowly, vibrantly, the green reclaimed my front yard. Henderson himself became a shadow of his former, preening self. The obsessive lawn care continued, perhaps even more intensely now, but the air of smug superiority had completely evaporated. He actively avoided eye contact, often darting back inside if he saw me or Mrs. Gable outdoors. In a neighborhood where gossip travels faster than lawnmowers, the story spread, even without explicit details from the HOA. People noticed the lawn crews working extensively at my place and Mrs. Gable's. They noticed Henderson's sudden, withdrawn demeanor and the absence of his usual critical commentary over the fence lines. While the precise nature of the doubled fine wasn't common knowledge, the narrative was clear. Henderson had done something seriously wrong, something involving chemicals and property damage, and he had faced significant consequences. His once admired perfect lawn now seemed less a symbol of dedication and more a monument to his toxic pettiness. He still had his perfect grass, but he'd forfeited any shred of neighborly respect. Life on our street settled into a new, more peaceful normal. Ironically, the whole ordeal made me appreciate my own lawn more. Maintaining it felt less like a chore and more like tending to a space I had fought to protect and restore. My son could run and play on the grass again without a flicker of worry about lingering chemicals crossing my mind. The initial sense of violation and anger gradually faded, replaced by a quiet confidence and a sense of justice served. Yes, the entire episode was stressful, infuriating, and demanded far too much of my time and energy. It dragged me into a conflict I never sought. But looking back, there's a profound satisfaction in knowing I didn't sink to his level. I didn't meet vandalism with vandalism. I gathered facts, trusted the process, even the often maligned HOA process, and achieved a resolution that was not just fair, but fundamentally just. It reinforced the power of patience, documentation, and letting the system work. Sometimes the most effective revenge isn't a fiery explosion. It's a quiet, meticulously documented checkmate that hits your opponent precisely where their arrogance resides, their pride, and their bank account. My lawn is thriving again, my peace of mind is restored, and Mr. Henderson? He's just the guy next door now, trapped behind his perfect, expensive green wall. And that feels like the perfect ending.